So, Carrie, today we're going to be talking about how to protect your assets from some of the nursing home costs that people can experience in Florida. Um, and I want you to start us off like when people hear the term nursing home costs, what do they not really understand about how expensive long term care in Florida can really be?
Well, I think part of the issue is they assume that Medicare is going to cover a good portion of that ongoing. And so when they learn that Medicare is not going to pay for the long term care, and then they find out from the facilities what the private pay costs are actually going to be, it is quite a sticker shock for them. I first started this, I don't know, 27 years ago. The average cost of a nursing home was anywhere probably from, 6,000 to 8,000. I'm seeing it more along the lines right now, anywhere on the very low end of about 10,000. With the most I've seen in the last 6 months, about 18,000 a month. So, and that is oftentimes for a shared room, not a private room. So that kind of numbers, when you're looking at 18,000 a month, that is quite the sticker shock. And especially for a married couple, when you still have a spouse that's going to be living at home, having all of those day to day expenses that they've incurred along the way together. And all of a sudden now you're thinking, hey, me as a stay at home spouse, and paying $18,000 a month, how am I going to take care of myself for the next 10, 20, 30 years, depending on the age of the spouse? So it can be quite overwhelming and a little scary.
Okay. And, there's lots of terms out there, Medicaid, Medicare, Medicare Advantage, like all these things that are changing all the time. Could you just really quickly in plain language explain to us first what is the difference between what are Medicare and Medicaid? What are the differences? And then maybe talk a little bit about how they specifically relate to paying for nursing home care.
Okay, so this is often a big confusion for people. They will interchange the words Medicare and Medicaid all the time, which I can understand why, but just kind of in basic terms, Medicare is a federal health insurance for people typically 65 and older, individuals that may be younger and have certain disabilities or conditions.
Mhm.
On the flip side, Medicaid is going to cover medical costs for those individuals with limited income and or resources, and it does, or it can, if you're eligible, will cover long-term care costs. Medicare does not cover long-term care costs. And again, that's a source of confusion for people and a lot of misinformation out there that they may have spoken with other friends or family. And again, just kind of getting that terminology confused. Medicaid itself is a joint federal and state government program that's going to provide health and coverage and that long-term care for individuals with, like I said, with that low income and or assets. But you have to keep in mind when you think about Medicaid, it's kind of this umbrella that has a bunch of different programs under that umbrella. Now, a lot of those programs I don't deal with ever. Sometimes I deal with a few of them, but I don't deal with Medicaid for pregnant women or kids. My focus as an elder law attorney for the most part is I'm focused on long term care costs for my senior clients. So when you look at it from a long term care perspective and what those programs are, there's some collateral programs out there, but there's kind of two primary long term care Medicaid programs here in Florida. The one that most people have heard of or had some experience with is called the Institutional Care Program. We refer to it as the ICP program. But that's somebody that needs nursing home care, right? And needs skilled nursing in that nursing home environment. And kind of the way it works is, in very basic, simplistic terms, is that if I have to go into the nursing home, I am going to have a patient liability amount, even when I'm approved for Medicaid. I'm going to pay some dollar amount to the facility. And essentially, Medicaid gets billed the difference between my patient liability and the cost of care. Now, Medicaid gets a reduced rate, but that's the way, in simplistic terms, they're kind of filling the gap.
Okay. So let's talk a little more detail about that
Mhm.
Medicaid planning. Get to some of the basics. What does it actually look like? So maybe start with what kind of assets can people actually keep?
Mhm.
usually, and still qualify, and what assets are more at risk if they don't plan ahead?
Well, kind of right off the bat, a homestead here in Florida is an exempt asset up to the equity value of 750,000. So right off the bat, from the standpoint, if you've got that house, that's going to be an exempt asset. If the equity value exceeds the $750,000 and you have a spouse residing in the homestead, then it can be whatever the amount. It could be a $3 million house. It's going to be an exempt asset. Okay. So first and foremost, that house. Then we look at it from the standpoint of retirement accounts. Florida, we're really lucky that if you have, your different retirement accounts, whether it's your 401k, IRA, or 457, all these different retirement plans, Medicaid's rule is, all right, look, if you're receiving your required minimum distribution, so there's a month, there's a distribution coming out annually. What we tend to do is convert that to a monthly distribution based on the required minimum distribution through the IRS rules. And if they're receiving a monthly distribution from that IRA, the principal value is an exempt asset. Now it becomes income to them, but the principal's exempt. And that would be applicable whether it's the Medicaid applicant's IRA or 401k or any other type retirement account, or if it's the spouse's. So those, and we have a lot of people, a lot of clients come in that, are heavily invested in their IRAs. And so that is a way that we can immediately, as I described earlier, where you're taking what they thought was a countable asset and converting it to an exempt asset simply by making a monthly distribution from that IRA.
So let's talk about now some of those tools that we're going to use, some of the strategies to
Mhm.
protect these assets. What are
Mhm.
some of the common, you already mentioned an irrevocable trust. What are some of the legal tools that you're using to protect these assets from nursing home costs?
So, from a crisis planning standpoint, it's going to depend upon typically whether I'm dealing with a single individual or if I'm dealing with a married couple. So let's start with a single individual, a Medicaid applicant, not married. Oftentimes, I am looking at something called a personal care contract, which is going to be a contract between the Medicaid applicant and typically an adult child or somebody, a grandchild that's been doing a lot for that individual. And that personal care contract is essentially allowing the Medicaid applicant to prepay for services ongoing, for future services. And a lot of people will say, well, gee whiz, if they're in the nursing home, what kind of, why would you have to have somebody else providing any kind of caregiving or assistance? Well, you think about it, somebody's in a nursing home, you want to make sure that you've got somebody that's going to check on them, to talking to social workers, to advocate for them if there's a problem, paying their bills. There's a whole host of things that the nursing home is not doing for the individual that you want to have somebody, that can have some oversight and help you as needed. And so Medicaid says, hey, you can't pay them for prior services if you haven't. You can't go back in time, but you can prospectively pay them. And so, we draft a contract that's based on the average number of hours that caregiver is going to be providing each week. And there's an hourly rate, and you multiply that out over their life expectancy as determined by the Medicaid tables. And so you come up with some lump sum number. So that's a common strategy. We also look at, okay, do they still have their homestead? Does there need to be you can always improve the home if there needs to be a new roof put on, a new air conditioner, any other home improvements can be done. We always want to make sure that they have their prepaid funeral and burial contracts in place, cremation contracts, those need to be irrevocable. So those are just, kind of some of the basic things that we're looking at if we've got a single person. If you've got a married couple, you have some more options there. So from the standpoint of when I'm looking at a married couple, if I've got too much in that countable category of assets, one of the things that we can do is have that non Medicaid applicant spouse, which I would refer to as the community spouse, the well spouse. could make a loan to a trusted child or family member for a period of time, a lump sum loan that's paid back monthly. Along those same lines, that community spouse or well spouse, as we call them, could purchase a single premium immediate annuity, turning that into an immediate income stream for themselves, and it's no longer an asset. Again, always improving the house, upgrading their car, funeral arrangements. Again, there's a whole host of things that you have a lot more ability to use when you've got a married couple versus a single individual.